Hello, my name is Harald Katzmair from FASresearch, and I'm very happy to have this opportunity to present and share our main findings of our community arts network study we did in 2018. Why community arts? Why we think it's so important, specifically at this moment in our world, and this moment in history, to be interested in community arts and try to strengthen the field of community arts. I guess we're all aware of the fragmentation and the polarization that we see all around this world. This is something that we see is actually increasing. More and more hatred, more and more decisiveness, more and more polarization, which are almost necessarily will lead to a less and less capable society to act together, to work together, and specifically work together to solve the challenges that are out there. I would like to share one model that is a kind of baseline for this whole study. And it explains nicely why our community arts is important and what the virtues of community arts are. What you see here is a typical life cycle of an organization or a product or a town, but also kind of us human beings. And what you see here is everything starts somewhere. We call it startup, and it hopefully starts to grow. So there's a growth stage, and it will eventually lead to a moment of maturity or excellence. So there will be a moment where our process reaches its peak. But here you see, sooner or later, things are flattened out and come to an end, and disruption will happen. And with disruption, deconstruction, a moment of destructurization, which leads to a stage we call the development stage. So you have a growth stage and you have a development stage. And development means you have to learn to let go, find something new in order to start fresh. Here you see that's going on when you learn. So there's new knowledge that you implement and you deepen the knowledge, you grow in mastery, you deepen it. But there will be a moment where what you know and what you observe in the world is not aligned anymore. So it's confusion that's kind of happening. So there's a gap between knowing and experiencing, which leads to the stage where you cannot rely on what you knew and what you know. You have discovered something new. You have to start a process of exploration, which requires that first you have to learn to let go, to unlearn, etc. And again, you have this beautiful loop here, this infinity loop of learning. And what we are convinced why community arts is so important is because community arts are arts that helps individuals and communities to discover their potential, to realize their potential as individuals and as a community is absolutely supportive in learning how to learn, in learning how to go through those cycles that we see here again and again and again. Because in community arts, there are certain virtues that you acquire. Think about it. When you learn to play an instrument or play in an orchestra, so there is ambition that's required, a passion, a commitment, but also the kind of courage to start to learn an instrument. It requires discipline. It requires empathy to listen to your colleagues. There is a moment of responsibility. You have to show up when there is a concert and the others are waiting for you. They just cannot show up. Hopefully there is a moment of joy, of mastery, of control when you learn to play an instrument, which all gives you a sense of dignity. But when you learn something, things will go wrong. So there will be failures. With failures, you learn to acquire the virtue of humility, but also of realism. So realism in terms of where I'm standing, what are things that I've already achieved, or where I have to build on, or what I got to improve. Which means that you have to sometimes change things, learn to adapt, learn to adjust, right? So there's a developmental moment, or well, you have to learn to trust in yourself or into others, etc., etc. So all those virtues are involved when you are part of a community arts project. All those virtues are required to learn how to learn, to go through the cycles of growth, maturity, crisis, and renewal. And that's why we think our community arts is so essential. And for us in this study, there were like 3 questions at the core of the study. Question number 1 is, how can we make the community arts initiatives that are out there in the world visible? How can we map the network of people and institutions at the local and the global scale, reveal their strengths and weaknesses? That was number 1. Number 2, what's about the narrative about community arts? I mentioned already we think deeply that there is a lot of virtues involved, and a lot of virtues are manifested when you're part of a community arts project. But what does it mean in terms of how we talk about community arts? What's the narrative? What's the narrative among those who are activists in the field, but also what are the narratives among those who are funders? What can we learn of that? And we thought we might help to improve or deepen or fine-tune the community arts narrative. This was second question. And the third question was, what does this mean when you're a funder? So what does it mean in terms of your portfolio? We know the motives, the perspectives, and the needs of our community arts activists and institutions. Where are the white spaces? What are the things that we should support? How should we realign or reallocate existing fundings and portfolios? So those 3 questions are at the heart, at the core of our study. And I would like to start with the first part, making the community arts network visible. And let's see what we discovered there. So, well, okay, let's start with the first part of our study, the first question we tried to answer. Let's see what we discovered when we looked at the network, the community arts network that is out there. Important here is just a few words about the methodology. It was very easy, very straightforward. With altogether 325 people around the world we interviewed. The interview was on the average 30 minutes to 1 hour. And I hope that some of you who are watching now at this moment this video were part of our interview portfolio. And what we did was we asked the people, okay, who do you think is doing great work in the field of community arts? Who is an innovator? Who is someone who's a pioneer, who's doing great work, who's an established player? So who are the people and the projects and the organizations out there who should be on a community arts map? That's what we ask. Who should be on this map? We want to create a map of community arts initiatives. Who should be on this map? And all together, we had over 2,000 institutions worldwide nominated by those 325 people. Behind those 2,000 are 45 organizations. We had over 1,400 people that we were able to identify. And the stunning thing about this, and we at FASresearch, we do a lot of those kind of snowball sample studies, because it's called snowball sampling because you ask people who should be on the map, and then we contacted those people who were nominated and asked them the exactly same question. The stunning thing here is we never in the history of FASresearch did a study with this amount of women among those who were nominated. So we had 52, almost 53% of those who were nominated were women, which means community arts is a female domain. It's a women's domain. As far as I remember, one of the studies with the highest amount of women was like around 30%. Usually, when you do those kind of mappings, you see it's a man's world. It's dominated by men, and in this case, it's the other way around. So this was already, I think, a very, very important finding. When you look at the map, the World Web, we had all together 92 countries were involved. That's huge. We covered specifically Europe, North America, and South America. We kind of decided that Asia would be not at our focus. It has, to be honest, it has something to do with language. It would have added huge amount of costs to the process to conduct this study. But still, we had some really, really nice, interesting nominations in the Asian region. Well, here's our focus regions. What you see here is the heart of the network in terms of who nominated who. I will talk about this in a moment, but what you see from the very beginning is this huge field of our people and initiatives are spread around the world. Most of them were from Europe. So Europe is the heart of the network. It is still the place where you have the highest number of community arts initiatives. It's not just something to do with our methodology. When we started this snowball sampling, we really were very carefully selected the starting points to be evenly distributed over different geographies. So still, Europe is at the heart. You see 25% of those nominations are in Latin America, South Central America, 12.4% in North America. Still are quite a number of initiatives in the Middle East. So again, the way how we created the network was we asked people who should be on the map, who is somebody who is great in community arts. Then we contacted this person and asked this person exactly the same question. Right. And the interesting thing is the question about the endogamy of those nominations. So will Europeans just nominate Europeans, or will they cross territories, cross geographies? And what you see here is the highest amount of endogamy we find in Latin America. So 90% of our interview partners, they are nominated people out of Latin America, followed by North America. The least amount of endogamy we find in Middle East. What does it mean? Those who are in Middle East are more likely to nominate people from other parts of the world. This, I think, is a very interesting fact because it shows the openness, the amount of openness of different regional communities. The same we were interested in different categories of community arts. Here, first are the percentages of different categories. We have our intermediaries, like funders, like our institutions who really were supporting community arts. 1/3 of those who were identified. With the highest number in music, right? Then we have a kind of cross sector, so we have your music, dance, and theater all together. Then theater 40%, dance and performance 6.6%. The interesting thing is when we look at the endogamy of those nominations, that you see here, people from the field of music nominate others from the field of music, which means you have a high number of inbreeding of behavior of like, okay, we are a community, but we're not reaching across other categories of arts. Whereas in dance, for example, you have like just 57% of those who are in dance are nominated others from dance, which means there's a greater openness to other types, other categories of community arts. It's obvious that theater and dance seems to be much more open towards other categories of arts compared with music. I think that's an interesting finding, specifically when you want to build a network, want to create more coherence between different fields of arts. You always want to know who are potential brokers, who are those who can translate or convert different forms of art. Talking about the network, what we see here is not just the segregation between different types of arts, between different categories as we've seen before. There is also a geographic segregation, which has a lot to do with what we saw before with the endogamy, with the behavior that people from the same geographic region tend to vote or nominate others from the same geographic region, but with the exception of the Middle East, those who are in the Middle East. So what you see here is like a fragmented landscape. And when you look at the network for a moment, just watch it, and what you see is there is not a clear core or center, right? I mean, you have here like a surface where actors are distributed all around. I mean, you have a periphery, but there's not a clear core, not a clear community that's dominating, where everyone around the world would say, oh yeah, there should be on the map. So there's not a clear reputational leader in this network. And we as social network analysts, we have our algorithms that help us to identify sub-communities in this landscape, and we applied one of those algorithms, we discovered, or we identified 101 sub-communities, 101 small worlds that are making up this this network. What we see here, this is like a finding, with all those different communities, with not a clear center, and we came to the conclusion that community art seems to be more a global community of ideas or of an idea, but not it's not yet a global community network. It has not a strategic core, a strategic center. There's not those 25 community arts organizations everyone knows in the world and everybody would point to. No, it's like a small world community phenomena, which will bring us later to a very important conclusion, because we definitely think that we should have a core. There should be something like a strategic center, but we will come to this back later. Let's move to question number 2, to the question of what is our narrative? What is the story we want to tell, we can tell, what community arts is or why it's useful? What frames should we use? And for that I have to share this slide again, this model again. It's the core of our study. This infinity loop. And again, we have this kind of different stages in organizations, different stages in the cycle of learning. The interesting thing is that all those different stages have their own voices, their own experiences, their own actors, their own players, their own roles. Think about when you're at the beginning of something, you're in this startup mode, right? This is like you want to have impact in this world. You want to compete with others, change the world. It's about an individual thing. So individualism is a typical voice that you would hear at the beginning of a cycle. And once you grow, and you grow in complexity and in power, the hierarchical voice is kicking in. It's more about our top-down solutions. You want to introduce standards, excellence is a value of hierarchism. The moment our surprise is kicking in the moment of our disruption, this is a moment where the world does not behave in a way as you would like it to behave or you would expect to behave. Fatalism is a kind of a voice that you will hear. It's like a moment of anger, of nihilism, but also of distrust. Things don't work anymore. There's disappointment out there. Once you are facing disappointment, there's hopefully the egalitarianistic voice out there that helps you to overcome. So the value of community, the value of diversity, the value of let's change things bottom up are typical voices of this stage of the egalitarianist stage. But in order to find something new, in order to find something for the next cycle, the voices of autonomy are important because you need a certain amount of independence. You need something like you have to find your own voice. You have to do your own thing, go your own way, which might lead to the discovery for the new, for the next. And this small of the 5 voices was kind of the background wall of our study, and we were interested when we talked with people, what kind of voices will we hear? What kind of voices were uttered and articulated? Talking about what motivates people, what is the motivation to be in community arts? And when you look at the statistics, top 5 motivations are top 4 all were like egalitarianistic voices. When you talk about it, we are in community arts because we want to foster tolerance, social cohesion, which is like a classical voice of egalitarianism. We want to change culture and society, want to make it accessible to all, bring diverse people together, foster dialogue, decrease barriers. Those are voices that are clearly assigned to egalitarianistic values. But you also have like an autonomistic voice, like we want to help people to find their own voice, give them a sense of self-expression. Those are like the motivations. Talking about the impact of community arts, how different groups or how those who we ask measure impact. We have there like the egalitarianistic voice is by far the one who was the loudest, or those we were able to hear most frequently. So it's about at the individual level to increase the level of empathy, social emotional skills and competences were strength. We have like our influence on life and career, about the long-term effect, this sense of agency that people develop when they are in their environment where co-creation will be trained and practiced. So, but here again, this is like the first part where we already heard the hierarchistic voice speaking. When it's about, we want to have like a clear measure, higher school attendance and educational achievement. So we have here this language of like, we want to see outcomes, tangible outcomes, like we know it from governmental agencies, or when we think about discussions about how to improve schools, how to measure that there's improvements. So what we observed was like a clear overrepresentation of the egalitarianistic voice with some elements of the hierarchistic or the hierarchical voice. And we think that there is a tension, there is like a potential conflict, because we know that the activists, those who are into community arts, are motivated by those egalitarianistic elements, are motivated by those egalitarianistic values, whereas the donors many times are motivated by individualistic and hierarchistic values. So therefore we think we should come up with a more integrated story, a more integrated advocacy story of community arts. And we think this kind of would be beautiful to bring all those voices together, coming up with a suggestion of what community arts is. And here it is. We think that community arts can be defined as a practice to uncover, grow, and actualize the vital potential of individuals and communities to keep on going, to learn and perform even under critical conditions. So we think this is a beautiful definition that strongly linked with this idea of resilience, but it represents the idea that when you are in community arts, the virtues you acquire, the skills that you acquire, are not just skills for the stage of like how can a community renew itself and heal itself, when it's torn apart by war and conflict or social economic challenges. We think that community art harbors the potential to contribute to all stages. That's why we say it's all about to uncover potential. So you find it, you discover it, you grow it, you nurture it, and you actualize it, you realize it. You're stronger in uncovering, growing, and performing through community arts. That's what we think could be a more fine-grained, or not fine-grained, a more integrative advocacy story that brings in all those 5 different voices that we've seen before. Well, what does it mean for the funding strategy? What does it mean when we talk about allocating funds, developing portfolios? Well, what you see here is like all those projects that were nominated as best practice projects. So we asked people, who do you perceive as being a best practice or community arts initiative? And we asked them, what are the criteria that makes them best practice? So what is the scale that you use to judge, to assess this is a best practice project? And again, we're not surprised after what we've heard before. Those were like egalitarianistic attributes, like we have a bottom-up approach, or we facilitate community building, there is a moment of democratization of art. So we're not surprised on that. But when we ask them, okay, those are the scales, how you measure excellence, how you measure does it mean to have a best practice project, but what is required to have more of that? So what is required to have more best practice projects in the field of community arts? What kind of resources are required? What competences we have to acquire, and what mindset is needed? And here's something that I think is striking. First point, of course, people say, yeah, we need money and funding. I mean, that's a no-brainer. We need resources. But when we talked about resources, the next after money was like, we need networks and platforms, and we need spaces and infrastructure for that. And when we asked them about what kind of competences are needed, From this very beginning, we need the competence to cooperate, to collaborate. We need the competence to exchange knowledge, to have like more robust ways to build capacity. The core was the articulated need. We need more collaboration, but we need the skills for that. We need the capacities and the capabilities to collaborate. We need a way to bring all those red squares that represent our projects that were regarded as best practice. We have to bring them together in order to help them to learn together, to make the knowledge that's distributed now over the network, move it from the local scale to the global scale, and move global knowledge again to the local scale. So make the local knowledge global and make global knowledge local. Have this kind of brain circulation, this capacity to learn, and not as we see now with all those community arts initiatives, they all try to reinvent the wheel again and again for themselves, to operate in an environment that's too isolated, or they don't have the resources now to reach out to others. Our resources are needed for staff, but not for cooperation. But because there's this lack of cooperation and learning together, there's of course a lot of our dysfunctional elements. And it's not something that we say, that's what the community arts activists themselves are articulating. We're too inefficient, we don't learn together, we don't have this way to exchange and share best practices. That's a problem. So what we've heard from dozens and dozens of people we talked with was this need that we need a kind of platform to bring all those people together who are already working in community arts, bring them together to learn, to share, to co-create, and establish a culture to listen to each other and to learn from each other in a way that we don't make the same mistakes that others already made. So how can we reduce our costs of failure that was not something that we are as scientists, or this is not an interpretation. This is something that the people we talked with articulated themselves. They are aware of the problem that we have not the culture to learn together that would be required to be more effective and more efficient. Allow me to sum up the three main findings that we came up with in this study on community arts networks. Challenge number one are the network as we see it now lacks institutionalized centers. So we don't have events, we don't have cyclic events where we all come together once a year or twice a year. So we don't have this kind of frame to come together and learn. We have community arts, therefore, is something that's a global idea, and it's an idea that's fortunately on the rise. So we have more community arts initiatives, but it's not a global community. We have thousands of initiatives who pursue their own thing, but they are not connected together. They reinvent the solutions for similar problems again and again, which means local knowledge doesn't get global and global knowledge doesn't diffuse to the local scale. This is inefficient. This is a problem. We have to find a solution for that. The second problem is also linked with our fragmentation. But here it's not about the geographic fragmentation. It's a fragmentation between different categories of arts, different art forms, which means theater, music, dance, poetry, They're all like do their own thing. They tend to do their own thing, specifically music. Specifically music as a high tendency for what we call network closure. There's a lack of exchange with other art forms. We think that's problematic. We think that also music would be stronger, would be stronger if it would be connected also to other categories of arts. There's huge synergies that could be realized if we would share knowledge, infrastructure in a more robust and structured way. Well, and the third challenge that we see is the story itself, and we have to be very honest about ourselves in terms of what our motivations are. Community arts is driven by an egalitarianistic, inclusive motive. That's like, those kind of values are predominant, and there's nothing wrong about that. But think about it. When we talk about inclusion, we want to include people who are belong to our socioeconomically challenged or communities. We want to bring in people at the fringes. But if we talk about inclusion, we also have to be aware of, we have also include other voices who are not just driven by egalitarianistic motives. That's a kind of paradox that we are, when we talk about our community arts as arts with a social cause, that there is actually also other values that don't feel represented in this definition. That's why we came up with a broader definition as community arts being something that helps to discover, grow, and realize the potential to learn and to perform even under critical situations. So learn and perform. And the performance part is important because we think that our performance excellence is a value we know most of the donors who give share, that's important to them, and therefore we think that when we talk about a platform, when we talk about a platform that's required to bring all those groups together, we definitely have to think about a platform that not just links community arts initiatives, but also links the community arts folks with business, with technology, with our community workers, with social workers. There's different people or different groups who are not included at this moment, and we strongly believe that we would have a more resilient, more impactful community arts world if we would have a place where all this variety, where those different groups of people would start to work together. There's a huge potential to learn from each other, given the right setting and the right facilitation. And we should pursue this this goal. We should come up with something, and I'm hopeful and I'm confident that our study will contribute to the emergence of such a platform, that there are donors out there, that there are people out there, foundations out there who see that there is a lack, that they see that there's a strategic opportunity to activate a decisive leverage point, and this leverage point is called networking, collaboration, bring people together, let them co-create, let them learn, let them build a vivid, resilient ecosystem of community arts initiatives. So this was the presentation of our main findings of our community arts study we did in 2018. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it and there were some findings and facts that were interesting to you. If there's anything you want to know, you will find on the insert our email address. Just drop us a mail, and we are happy to answer your question. Thank you very much. See you next time. Bye.